we're going to turn it over to our panel on climate mitigation and adaptation for water utilities, European priorities for future-proof services. I'm going to kick it over to Alexei de Kirchhoff with our sustainability team in Europe. So with that, Alexei, take it away.
Thank you very much, Josh. I hope you can hear me well. And welcome everyone to our panel discussions here focusing on the European priorities for future-proof water services. I am Alexis de Kerkhove. I lead client sustainability for Xylem Europe, and I will be the moderator of this wonderful panel that we have today. Just before jumping in, I will follow up on Austin's words in the introductions that today our world is changing fast. Unfortunately, it's faster than we would like it to be. Between climate change and energy crisis, time is urging us to take action now. We are here for that around this table. The reality is that making change within the water sector, and I think you will all agree with me, is a slow process. And so more joint initiatives are needed today so that within the coming 10 years, those 10 years that we have now to take actions, we can collectively reform the way we manage water and wastewater by building energy neutrality, meeting net zero greenhouse gas emissions, and leading to a full circular economy. Only then can we build the future-proof water services that will sustain our society. Europe is getting ready for such disruptive transformation. In the last 5 years, reforms of water legislations are guiding the sector in gaining efficiencies and building resilience. Also, Europe accounts for one of the largest density of transformative water utilities who started early in this journey. So we want to share today this experience of those that are part of this journey, these transformations in Europe. On this, let me introduce you to this exceptional panel. And I'll have actually a quick slide to make sure that everybody can see who we're talking about on people in the room. And I will start with you, Ms. Veronica Manfredi, Director of the Zero Pollution and DG Environment at the European Commission. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Your directorate plays a pivotal role in leading Europe towards zero pollution and securing an effective management of water. So welcome. Next, Mr. Hans Goossens, CEO of Belgium's largest public water company, the Water Group. Hans, you also serve as president of Water Europe, a membership-based organization promoting water-related innovation in Europe. We have Mr. Ruben Fernandes, CEO of the second largest utility in Portugal, Aguas e Energia de Porto. He carries a deep expertise in urban and regional development across private, government, and academia. Thank you very much for being here with us. Mr. Mats Leth, CEO of the most progressive front-runner water utility that I know. Welcome, thank you for being here with us, focusing on sustainable operations and capital investment, VCS Denmark. He holds more than 25 years of experience in management and leadership of private and public sector. Welcome, Mats. And finally, last but not least, Professor Norbert Jardin, CEO of one of the largest water utility in Germany, Ruhrverband. Professor, you hold also a honorary professorship and you teach wastewater engineering. So as you can see, we have a more than exceptional panel today, and I welcome you all. And I hope that everybody, yep, perfect. You're there with me. So in the next 45 minutes or so, we will go through an open discussion among us in intending to understand how this transformation is happening in our hands. And I will start with setting up the context, right? With my first questions targeted to you, CEOs of water utilities. What is your experience of the last decade in pursuing more advanced ambitions while maintaining high quality water and sanitation services? And I turn the word to you, Hans, if you want to start with this first perspective.
Thank you, Alexis, and I'm very pleased and honored to be in this panel for a more than interesting debate, I would say. Um, Actually, you reflected on the fact that there is the need and the urgency for change, but that we see it slowly happening in the water sector. I think we need to realize that the water sector is not only a very mature sector, but a sector with a history which has built, let's say, the actual system of supplying and sanitation, starting mid of the 19th century already, and very much driven by public initiatives to, let's say, take care of public health. It developed by city waterworks, and as the welfare increased in regions like Europe, water use has increased. That means that the water companies, mostly public companies, they needed to look after more sources, more diverse sources, surface water, rainwater. Came with that a technology development, membrane technologies, definitely also. But let's be frank, at a pace whereby actually relatively easy one could balance supply and demand. And that was definitely helped by a regular rain pattern, a mild climate in typically the European region. So what has changed and what has actually also triggered the ambition, I think, of many of the water companies on, let's say, starting a journey on development and increasing the speed of change is actually the fact that the last decade we have seen year after year, and I would almost say year after year increasingly, climate extremes. Climate extremes which were most expressed as the longer periods of droughts, as we have seen again last summer, with heat waves which are more intense and more extended, with peak consumptions as a consequence. And that means that where a water supply system has been architectured over the century in a certain way of mild and regular pattern of climate and weather, and where we traditionally have been more looking into making it resistant against flooding, we see now that we need to change it quite rapidly, on making sure that it is adjusted and it is resilient, not only against flooding, but definitely also against water shortage. And that has created, as we can see, let's say, this sense of urgency. And I must say, I'm an optimistic, and I see more and more dynamism in the sector, where a lot of initiatives are taken to adapt and to mitigate these climate change effects. Very much also driven by an awareness that is only present in a water company, is that water, climate, nature are very much interlinked, which means that sustainability and sustainable management of the water resources is, I would say, by definition, in the DNA of the water companies. Linked to that, I think we see that as sustainability is high on the agenda, and as the need for running the business in a sustainable way is there, the link with energy is also there. And we see actually that the nexus, water and energy, which has always been there. We read a lot of it the last decade, we could say. But I started working too many years ago, I would say, for a company which was founded in 1905 around the nexus of water and energy, which means that there is this nexus. And when we go for more sustainability, when we go for more circular economy, we see that as circles are getting smaller, we see that the elements of the nexus are coming closer together. And that for me is also the reason why I think that we see indeed an increased ambition and an increased urgency with the water companies and all the players in the sector, I would say, on indeed starting the journey on bringing back losses, NRW, and so on.
Thank you very much, Hans. Great to see your perspectives on bringing up those elements together, the sustainability drivers behind the sector. Let me turn to you, Ruben. Would you share your perspective from Porto, in Aguas de Porto?
Of course. Hi, Alexis. Let me first compliment my fellow and quite renowned panelists, as well as all participants who are with us online today. And thank you for the invite to be here today. So in the case of Águas de Energia do Porto, which is based in the city of Porto in Portugal, our work dates to the creation of the public company, so in 2006, even though we are a centenary water utility. Back in the day, so from 2006 onwards, our ambition was to become more and more sustainable while ensuring the financial health of the company. And to do so, we completely changed, for example, the way we transport water within the city, especially by taking advantage of gravity, something that we can do in Porto, and therefore by relying as little as possible in pumping systems. So in the case of the drinking water system, we can say that today this is an almost energy and carbon neutral system. In addition to that, a huge investment has been made by Águas do Porto in the digitalization of the drinking water system, which has allowed us to model the network and to create some predictive tools. And as a result of this huge investment, many efficiencies have been achieved. And for example, water losses in an old city like Porto have decreased from more than 52.4% in 2006 to less than 14.5 by the end of the second semester of 2022. So, I think that these numbers are quite expressive. However, despite all this, we recognize that there's still much to be done in our utility, especially in the wastewater and stormwater systems. This is more urgent than ever, given that with the passage of time, the climate crisis has become more and more acute. So now for us, the ambition is not only to be a sustainable utility, but also to be part of this solution to this global crisis, both at the mitigation and adaptation sides. More than that, being part of the solution for us nowadays is not only about reducing our carbon footprint, which is very, very important. It is also about, for instance, using the subproducts of our activities, such as those related to wastewater treatment process or to the work that we do in our seafront site area to meet local needs. So just a few examples among these products, we can find biocompost that can be used in agriculture. We can find algae that is collected in our beaches, reused treated water that can be an alternative source of water for non-potable uses. phosphorus that can be eventually recovered from our wastewater treatment process. The same can be said about biogas that we produce in our wastewater treatment plants. And in other words, and just to finalize, I think that being part of the solution for us is connecting all these dots of sustainability. So energy and carbon neutrality, circularity, biodiversity protection and recovery, as we do in our interventions in streams and rivers, nature-based solutions, just to name a few. And that's it from my side, from now at least.
Thank you, Ruben. And I'd like to enhance your message on how sustainability and financial benefits on the operations are interlinked and driving on the decision making. I mean, your examples of optimizing the water distribution through gravity and the digital transformations of your system were really, I think, really relevant at this point. Mats, may I turn to you to hear about your context and how your ambitions are helping you driving the business?
Thank you very much, Alexis, and thank you very much for the kind introduction and the invitation to participate here today. VCS is, on a European scale, probably a smaller utility. We are in the third largest city of Denmark, but we, of course, experience a lot of changes this past decade, as many others. And I think Hans highlighted some of them, and Ruben added a few more. But I would like to add also that it is really in the DNA of a utility to constantly evolve the business. And it is obvious with the climate crisis and biodiversity crisis that we play a more crucial role in the society now than we did in the 50s. Back then, being a water utility was supplying clean drinking water to the public and to the industry and taking care of the wastewater. Now it's a much more diverse business. The city where we are in Odense in Denmark is changing. It used to be an old industrial city with a lot of heavy industry. Now it's a modernized city. The city is growing, population is growing, more densely populated, and there's hardly any industry left. The latest industrial park is mainly occupied by Facebook's data center. And they use drinking water for cooling all their servers. So it's a completely different business now, supplying water to a data center compared to a paper mill that was here 15 years ago. So urbanization is one of the key drivers here. That, combined with the changing climate and the biodiversity crisis, energy crisis, that completely changes the focus of our business. So when the city is growing, we have a more dense population. There's also the constant battle for area in the city. So the city developers wants to build more houses, more apartments, and we need room for heavier rainfalls, for handling storm waters. So there's a constant battle for city area, for city development. But I see a huge potential for utilities in this, that we can focus not only on handling water, but we can focus on developing this blue-green infrastructure, like Ruben also mentioned. It's very, very important to look at more perspectives of your solutions today. So focusing also on energy. It is clear that the driver is now looking or switching to more sustainable operation. Energy and energy neutrality has been in our strategy for the past more than 10 years. And we do operate our entire business energy neutral today. So we produce more energy than we consume, and we can sell any excess heat and electricity to the grid of the city today. we actually started out focusing on being CO2 neutral. But focusing only on CO2 is not enough. We need to focus on energy, but we also need to focus on N2O emissions, methane emissions. We need to focus on biodiversity, climate change. And so it is a much more diverse business. And that has become very obvious for the past 10 years, that it is not enough to focus on becoming CO2 neutral. It is not enough to focus on becoming energy neutral. And that said, that completely changes our business. And one of the drivers for us is focusing on new technology. We need new technologies to solve new complex problems. But we also need new relations and sharing knowledge. And that is why, as Ruben mentioned, we are also part of the solution. I think we'll get back to that later in this panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Matt. Very insightful, and I love this. You're repeating several times that the business is different. We're not talking anymore about managing just water and wastewater. No. The sector is doing so much more, which is absolutely.
We are really adding to the value of the livability of the cities around us, and that has become very, very important over the past 10 years.
Professor Jardine, turning to you on really resetting the whole context of introducing this panel. What is your perspectives from the Reservoir view?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexis, for this question. And it's really an honor to be part of this discussion. Greetings to all the participants and the panelists. As Reservoir, we are operating our utility in a whole catchment area of the Reservoir in this case, and are responsible for the drinking water services for 5 million people, nearly 5 million people, and we are operating 65 wastewater treatment plants. So we are active in both fields, in the drinking water sector and in the wastewater sector. When we started some 20 years ago with the question, what does climate change means for our water services? Our first focus was mainly on adaptation strategies, how to overcome the challenges of climate change. Hans already mentioned floodings and droughts. And to give you an idea, we now have finished the 14th year with under average yearly rainfall this year. So this gives you an idea. What does climate change means for water service, for securing drinking water supply? And we are still just in the middle of realizing adaptive measures to cope with the challenges of climate change. But in the year 2006, we rose a question which Austin has already tackled in her introduction. Is adaptation enough for us as a water utility? Or what is our role in driving climate change? What are our answers in terms of how can we mitigate the climate change, and how can we reduce our share in greenhouse gas emissions? And in 2006, our focus was relatively narrow. We focused very much on energy and set up a program to become more energy efficient in the operation of our 65 wastewater treatment plants. So we set up a goal to double the amount of energy we produce with regenerative means, meaning combined heat and power plants, hydropower plants, solar power plants on our facilities, and at the same time to reduce the energy consumption of our wastewater treatment plants substantially. So today we have doubled the amount of regenerative energy production and have halved the energy consumption of our wastewater treatment plant. So the next step, and we have already announced that within our board, is to become energy neutral for the whole utility. So by the year 24, our ambition is to produce, as Mats already mentioned for his utility, in our whole area with our whole service that we produce on a yearly basis, at least enough energy to serve all our electricity demands in the utility. So this is our next step. And if we break that down on every single wastewater treatment plants, we are now reconfiguring our wastewater treatment plants plant by plant. And the idea is not only to operate them energy neutral, which is already the case on several of our plants, but also to improve the treatment efficiency. Because what we have learned in discussing this matter is only being energy neutral is not ambitious enough for our utility. Our next step will to become climate neutral. So take also into account the other greenhouse gas emissions. And one substantial share of our greenhouse gas balance is the amount of N2O emissions on our wastewater treatment plants. And what we have learned in the last year is that there is a direct correlation between the amount of nitrogen elimination on the treatment plant and the emission of N2O. So by increasing treatment efficiency, we directly have control over the N2O emissions. And we have established a process configuration on our plants, which brings us to a situation that we can operate these treatment plants not only energy neutral, but also with very, very low total nitrogen concentrations in the effluent. Not more than 5 milligrams of total nitrogen in the effluent on our larger wastewater treatment plants. So by that, we also have some influence on our greenhouse gas balance. And this will be the next step to become climate neutral. And our goal and ambition is to reach that by 2030. So by 2030, we try to aim for a greenhouse gas neutral operation of the whole utility. And as all the other panelists already mentioned, this changes the focus of the utilities tremendously. We are not only responsible for water services, but also part of the road to the race to zero, and have also our share in reaching the ambitious goal of the European Union. And this is something we have learned, at least in our utility, and I think most of the German utilities are more or less on the same pathway.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jardin, on these insights. We have witnessed now 4 testimonies of you driving higher ambitions within water services and so on. I'd like to understand, okay, we have a lot of drivers behind us, but running an organization like that and implementing those changes don't come without any difficulties. There are challenges being faced. I'd like to turn to you, Hans and Ruben, starting with you, Hans, on trying to hear, okay, within your journey, what type of difficulties did you face, knowing that you stepped forward maybe without having already directives in place to mandate your decisions?
Yeah, very good question indeed, Alexis, because we said, okay, I think it was back in 2018, 2019, that we started our journey on bringing down the non-revenue water, the leakages, the ILI, infrastructure leakage index. And actually we were at the level which was seen at the European stage as actually among the better ones, an ILI 1.57 percentage, 22-23% of leakage. And actually the biggest hurdle to take to start such a journey is to let the organization, the employees understand that what was good enough in the past is not good enough today and definitely not good enough for the future. And when we were saying that actually we have seen the climate change effects on repeated droughts and more longer periods of droughts, that means that we needed to turn the switch in our people's head on what was economically probably correct in the past to say, well, there is enough water. We need to protect against floodings. So we should not spend too much money and effort on reducing the leakage of the water from the pipes into the underground. Changing that mindset into, well, the reality has changed and the future will be even more like that. That we need to face the fact that water is not always there as we expect it to be there, coming from from pouring down from heaven, but that we need then to make sure that every water there is and every drop of water we can turn into drinking water, that we need to make sure that it also reaches our customers, the citizens, and the farmers and the industries, so that it can be used where it should be used for. I think that creating that sense of urgency, letting people understand, having that debate is very much important. The other thing which was very important to do is then to define this really as a program with several projects, with several project tracks, to bring structure in it and to follow up the progress. Actually, in the case of the water group, actually we defined 7 project tracks, which is on one hand on reducing the leakage and the impact of the leakage, but on the other hand, also on avoiding leakages. So both curative tracks as well as tracks to prevent leakages. And then it's let's say on all these tracks you find elements of technology. Digital metering is definitely there. Getting more insights out from data mining is definitely there. Looking into new technologies on leak detection in the streets is definitely there. But apart from the technology developments, it is very much also a cultural change that needs to be done. And actually, we decided to not only define a program, but to give it a specific name with a specific logo to communicate around it very often, not only internally. We call it, by the way, we call the program Leaky. And when you go in the elevator in our offices, you will find in the elevator, everyone is leaky. Just to make our people aware that this is a common effort. And it's what we also discussed is that because traditionally we tend to debate a lot whether we should measure and follow up on NRW percentage, or whether we should utilize the ILI factor, or whether we should measure the liters per kilometer of pipeline, and so on and so on. We said, well, we take two measurements which are relevant, and we don't use our time to debate about whether these are the right type of numbers, but we should spend our time on, okay, what actions are we going to take? And how are we going to measure that we truly make progress? And we are making progress. And the ILI, which was 1.7, is today at 1.2. So, but we see also that it's not that easy because it takes time. We have 34,000 kilometers of pipelines under the ground, meaning that, yes, a few percentage of leakage is already quite a few kilometers of pipeline that needs to be taken care of. But we keep on insisting and saying to our people actually that, well, there are 3 P's which are the major ingredients for every success. First of all, yes, there needs to be passion. We need to be convinced, all of us, that we are really passionate about bringing down this leakage. There is, of course, there needs to be performance. We need to really make sure that we have the right working processes in place and that people are really precise in execution of the job. But the third P we shall never forget is that success only comes from perseverance. We need to really persevere. We need to really understand that it is not an easy shot. This, if it would have been an easy shot, then all companies would have marvelous numbers. And with that, we say it's a long journey. But as they say in the African wordings, if you want to progress quickly, we go alone. But if we want to reach far distance, we need to go together. And that's why we also said that this is a journey we cannot run on our own. We built an ecosystem with different partners. The Water Group is a public company, but that ecosystem is consisting not only of other public water companies in Belgium, but definitely also of technology providers, which could be local or international technology providers. And you see that by joining forces, indeed, you can reach far better results than trying to solve it on your own.
Thank you very much, Hans, on those wise words there. Really appreciate. Ruben, what are your insights in terms of like breaking the barriers that you faced in your development?
Well, first, let me just tell you that I agree with Hans when he says that one of the challenges rests upon making the society and our customers understand the value of water, especially now in which we are living a context of water scarcity. So I think that's absolutely key. But other than that, and when I think about my company, I think that one of the main difficulties that we face every time usually is associated with change of culture. So namely in the way the company carries out its daily operations, and especially when such changes involving changing technology, which is usually the case. And nowadays, these challenges are even greater because technology is changing at a quite fast pace, and legal requirements regarding the operation and management of water systems, namely wastewater, are getting tighter and tighter. On top of that, if you want to meet these legal requirements in a coming future, and I don't think that we have other option but follow these legal requirements, then investments must be made, and therefore funding opportunities need to be found. And as we all know, these funding opportunities are not always available to us. And nowadays, all these challenges are even magnified by the increasing energy costs, which are expected to at least duplicate in our context by 2023. And which put us, utilities, in a position in which we need to make much harder investment choices because our financial resources are quite limited, as I think elsewhere. Another big challenge, I think, rests upon making decision makers, and namely the city council, aware that the world is changing and new types of investments are needed to tackle the problem of climate crisis. And I'll give you just an example to finalize my intervention. Part of our business model is managing and making interventions in rivers and streams. In order to help the city to become more resilient to the effects of climate change, especially when we are faced with these long periods of intense rainfall. And we do this kind of investments. We use nature-based solutions. We are gaining more expertise and knowledge in creating retention basins, in creating dikes in order to regulate the flow whenever, well, such extreme climatic events take place. But we think that decision makers are not very often aware of the importance of these investments for the security of people and goods in their cities. And I think that more support from them would also be welcome. And well, that would be it for now.
Really a very interesting point of view, and great to see the additional need of collaborations with the municipality, with the decision makers in the regions to make sure that a good understanding of the decision taken when it comes to water and resource management. I am mindful of time, and I realize, Veronica, I'd like to turn to you because I think that you have heard now really good insights from our four utility leaders here. And I'm wondering from, the development of where we see Europe today, great changes in legislations for drinking water directive, wastewater treatment plant directive proposals that came in. When we look at those, what is the European visions of water strategy for building a sustainable, future-proof resource management? How do you see all those pieces coming together?
Thank you so much, Alexis. And again, many thanks to the colleagues of the Reservoir Center for this wonderful opportunity. You put your question perfectly right. It's about bringing the different pieces together. And may I say that I fully share what the Water Europe president said about the fact that I always find in the water sector one of the economic sector in the European Union that really understands that they are at the crossroad between what we call at United Nations level by now the triple crisis, biodiversity, climate change, and pollution, which is all to be solved or unfortunately is aggravated by the resource efficiency crisis. So they are in the midst of this and they know it. And what we try to do as European Commission ever since the European Green Deal has been adopted, our new strategy for economic development of our old continent, is one that really tries to look at all these problems holistically. And our progressive first strategic papers, for the colleagues that are following us online, the European Commission has been extremely active throughout the pandemic years, 2020, 2021, adopting strategies to support biodiversity, to revamp the way in which even our agricultural sector work with the farm to fork strategy, to revamp circular economy. This is actually the economic model that we want to progressively embrace, no longer a model which uses resources and gets rid of them, but reuses, recycles. We are striving, and even more now after what's happening on the Ukrainian territory, for enhanced strategic autonomy. Well, I think the water sector ticks all these boxes. And actually, I'm again rejuvenated to hear from so many of our water utilities, in particular the colleagues that we have on the panel today, that they all feel they have a role to play, not just for climate adaptation and limiting the leakages and try to do something, but even for climate mitigation. Indeed, you were alluding to this recent proposal that we have tabled as European Commission to the European Parliament and the Council last October 26, which is a proposal to modernize the urban wastewater treatment. Is just an example looking at urban wastewater treatment to try and secure that we go towards, this is what we have proposed, energy neutrality, ideally by 2040, so a couple of decades for not just the colleagues in Denmark, but hopefully also the colleagues across the other 26 member states. We heard the ambition from the German colleagues, for example, and to progressively get there. And in reply to what Ruben is saying, how do you do it in Europe? We are not just a bunch of utopistic guys. We have regional support, so we have regional funds. We are pouring also, we should say, quite a lot of money into our research and innovation programs. So we have currently no less than 2, I would say in particular, missions that are really fundamental research and innovation missions on the role and functioning of our oceans and waters that are looking at breakthrough technologies to accelerate the market deployment of the best of what our research and innovation academia can do. But of course, we're also very much looking and exchanging views with colleagues on the other side of the Atlantic. May I say, for example, that I've always found super inspiring the experience of the San Francisco colleagues that have deployed already since a number of years what they call the circular water management buildings. I must say that in Europe, we are still not as advanced as we could be, for example, in rethinking the circular management of water. We could and we should, and we are getting there. But for example, we've also tabled legislative proposal to also revamp more reuse of water across our largest industrial processes. So what is our vision? A vision where progressively, either by legislative changes, but also, I must say, I believe very much in the role of engaging with local actors through our green city schemes, urban policies action, and indeed alliances between not just water operators, but also operators of different sectors, agricultural world, those part of the industry that, let's face it, are also right now also those that tend to pollute in a way that is particularly persistent and difficult to get rid of in water, become part of a progressive transformation that comes with structures and milestones. And these milestones have indeed been set in our strategic approaches with targets that look at the 2030 picture and actually design the way up to 2050. It's our goal by 2050, Europe must be climate neutral. And this doesn't just mean no greenhouse gas emission, but it means zero pollution. It means restored biodiversity, which means also better kept water through natural water retention as well. And it means a resource efficient economy. That's our vision.
Thank you very much, Veronica. You insight already quite a bit into your aspirations and the way you will see this development ongoing. You have a very international audience today in front of you and 4 leaders on the same panel. Is there anything specific that you would like to ask in addition to your comments on how would you expect this audience and these stakeholders to nonetheless accelerate the movement, but also share these informations to motivate these adoptions of new legislations, new vision across the sector?
Well, look, we are just less than 4 months ahead of a milestone, a watershed moment, really, we should say, which is the next United Nations Conference on the Water Decade. It's the first time that the entire world will be, gathered together looking at water challenges, which, as we know, are not just reflected in SDG 6, but I would say water is almost each and every one of the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, which I think makes the world just one, as unfortunately COVID-19 has made the world just one. So I think that I hope that the recent dramatic experiences also through the pandemic and other emergencies, including, of course, the water extreme events that we are witnessing across the globe, be it with excesses of water or dramatic and increasing scarcity of water, even in parts of our wonderful planet, which we're not used to those, makes us reason in a more united manner. I will not hide that as European Union, we are trying to steer the thinking and the activities also of our economic players next to our member states to try and come out from the UN Water Conference with a more common vision that hopefully it's a shared vision also with our partners about what we should do better, notwithstanding the already very many good things for which we are planting seeds through ongoing or planned legislative actions, to become, in a nutshell, I think, better prepared and truly more resilient. And personally, and here I'm really expressing personal views, I think that the agenda of what I call storing water or retaining it, so both through nature-based solution and also, thinking of all the built environment, is an agenda that needs to be stepped up, also because it requires indeed investments. And as Ruben was rightly pointed out, this means planning, money, organizing forces. And the agenda, maybe I should say already also, of more solidarity, because ultimately, of course, water is also a matter for, in certain countries, still for some years, naturally, there will be a little bit more abundance than in others. And now look at what's happening with the energy crisis. All of a sudden, we are finding revamped capacities to really join up our forces, because we see what is the reason to accelerate our let's say, independence from fossil fuel production. And we are capable of achieving so much if we eventually embrace unitedly the same goal and see with the same pair of eyes that indeed there is urgency, indeed we must be better prepared, and we better start now than having to do all the job in just a couple of years on such an important sector.
Agree.
Thank you. Thank you so much for leading this dialogue. I think it's fantastic to have you in this position and sharing this message. And I look back at our utility stakeholders on the panel, and hearing the message of Veronica on the ambitions of the visions of the strategy and so on. How, from your position, and I will turn to you, Mats, and Professor Jardine, how would you see your role as maybe front leader to support and accelerate this journey for other utilities in the sector who maybe may be struggling from different ways because it is the way it is. The infrastructure is old. There are different needs, socio-cultural needs locally that needs to be addressed. What will you recommend to do to support that? Maybe starting with you, Mats.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the question. There's a lot of technologies out there really that is readily implementable. So focusing on energy, there's a lot of technologies to reduce energy consumption. There's a lot of known technologies to increase energy production. So our utility, we focus very much on sharing all the knowledge that we have. That is part of the responsibility of being a public utility, I think, is to share the knowledge that we have. We do not benefit from not sharing. So we will happily engage in any network or any collaboration that we can participate in. And this was already mentioned, working with other utilities, working with tech suppliers, working with consultants and universities. I think all of our companies represented here today agree on that. But that is only on a national level. I would like to encourage also a more international collaboration between some of the utilities in Europe, or even with San Francisco or PUB in Singapore or other progressive utilities. Sharing knowledge, doing R&D projects with other utilities, with other universities is extremely important, being at the forefront. But we do also offer our knowledge and our specialists on a consultancy basis. So if we have utilities or countries or areas with specific problems, reducing non-revenue water, focusing on energy reduction, we do actually sell our knowledge specifically to other utilities or as subcontractors to consultants. So that is a way of also trying to take the lead and make other utilities follow the known footprints, is to sell your knowledge on a market basis.
Thank you very much. Absolutely great to see your openness in sharing. Professor Jardine, what is your perspective on that? And I'll let you respond, and then maybe we'll take one question from the audience that I received.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexis. I'm very thankful for Veronica to open the thinking and the stage on how utilities are looking on their ambitions and goals in the water sector. Until today, I would say water utilities are more or less responsible for the water sector itself, providing clean drinking water and wastewater services. But today we are also part of the circular economy. We are talking about phosphorus recovery, water reuse, energy neutrality, even climate neutrality as part of our ambition in terms of climate change mitigation. So the context has broadened a lot. This has to do with mindsetting in the utilities. And our role as utilities is to convince our peers and stakeholders that we have to move forward on this route and to adapt to what are the challenges in the near future. And this has a lot to do with communication, going in front of a longer queue of other utilities who are interested in what you are doing, what are your ambitions, and how can I follow your route in order to become, for example, energy neutral or even climate neutral. And I'm very thankful, Alexis, also to Xylem in supporting the Climate Smart Utilities initiative of the International Water Association. I'm working with the International Water Association now for decades and was a longer time on the board of directors of the IWA. And this is one of the most important initiatives of the near past to make the utilities aware of this new ambition to become climate smart. And I know Xylem was also very active in preparing the World Water Congress in Copenhagen and being part of the Climate Smart Utility Program. And this is one of the ideas to disseminate our thoughts, our experiences, our successes, and going in front of other utilities and showcasing what we have achieved, which also other utilities can achieve on this route. And I think this is our role, and therefore there are a lot of opportunities for all of us to share our experiences with others.
Thank you so much for those really kind words, also towards the Climate Smart Utility initiatives. That is to us also extremely close or important on how we drive this adoption of climate mitigations in addition to climate adaptation. Those are very interlinked. One cannot be done without the other. And I think we need to enhance this in the dialogue across. I'm receiving an open question from the audience in the Reservoir Center or online. And I read it as I receive it. So I'll let you in the panel decide who wants to shoot the response. How will future efforts not only integrate the different water fields, but also take into account other sectors, energy, transportation, industry, tourism, towards a stronger sustainable integration view, especially in the urban development? The floor is open. Who would like to respond first?
Well, I could maybe start and then the colleagues could definitely add on. I must say, and definitely from Water Europe, where we see actually the different roles and players in the ecosystem, the water ecosystem and the water value chain, we see the need actually towards a true paradigm shift that we need to make for building what we call a true water smart society. And what is a water smart society is where actually the way we organize and manage water is quite differently, whereby actually we say, well, actually it should be a society where water scarcity, regardless of the climate we face, and pollution of ground and surface water, regardless of the welfare we build and the industrial activities and food production activities we develop, that these are avoided, and that water, energy, and the resource loops are actually largely closed to foster a true circular economy and where the water system is resilient against these climate change events that we have discussed earlier. And actually, to do so, we believe it requires courageous decisions and perseverance, as we discussed before, investment, changes, but also new type of collaborations. If we want to come a long way, we need to work together, collaboration with the stakeholders at all levels. Actually, if we say it is a paradigm shift, it will require innovation. And innovation, we all know the famous quadruple helix, whereby we have the academics, the developers, we have the industry, but we do have also the citizens and the governance required to truly make this what we call water smart society. And in that water smart society, because when we say smart, people think a lot about digital. Yes, there is definitely a role for digital water and digital water technologies, but as well is there a role for hybrid gray and green water infrastructure. I think it was already addressed in this panel debate that actually water and climate and adaptation and mitigation are very much linked to each other, and that, let's say, water is affected by climate change, but the way we deal with water as a whole can actually influence a lot how we impact climate. And actually, we also see that in this water smart society, there is a role and much more bigger focus that we see on the famous reduce, reuse, recycle, which brings us also to what we call multiple waters, in the sense that water and water is not always the same water we are talking about. And we should progress much more and much at a higher speed on being truly smart with utilizing water for the right purpose. So it will require also new government structures, new business models. And we believe that to be successful there and to, let's say, realize that water smart society with these innovative concepts in an acceptable speed, that we need to really put focus on what we call living labs and water-oriented living labs, where, let's say, we can experiment and speed up the implementation.
Thank you.
I think actually these for us are the major elements of more than just a system change. I would say it's a true paradigm shift in the way we as a society deal with water.
Thank you very much, Hans, for the bridging towards the smart society vision of Water Europe. I do realize that we are at time, and even if this conversation is more than a passion to all of us and extremely interesting, we unfortunately need to go to an end. Mindful of your agenda, mindful of the agenda of the event. I would like to thank you once more time for all these fantastic messages and experience sharing that you have passed us, to the audience, to Xylem, and to the rest of the water utility and the water sectors that if they did not hear us today, will have a chance to maybe listen to some recording that we will make available later on. Veronica, thank you again for attending in this panel. I'd like to then pass it over back to you, Josh, at the Water Reservoir Center for the continuation of the event.